recorded, so if you have to leave at any point through it, you will be able to look back. So just to advise you of that. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Orla Bannon. I'm Head of Careers and Development here at Trinity, and I'm also the current chair of AHECS until July, so nearly there. And I'd like to welcome to our Lunch and Learn today Emma Kinsella from the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. Did I get it right, Emma? I always have to remember what all the letters stand for. And I suppose we've asked Emma to come today and have a chat with us because there's just so much change happening in the skills ecosystem nationally at the moment. The OECD were over, did a review, which I know Emma is going to speak about. And there's a lot of recommendations and actions coming from that will impact on the skills infrastructure ecosystem in Ireland and will also impact on our work as careers professionals supporting our students and our learners. So Emma is the head of the Skills, Policy and Enterprise Engagement Unit in the department, and her focus of her presentation today is going to be on increasing the navigability of the skills ecosystem. So Emma's going to kick off with her presentation. We'll run through that. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll come back to them at the end, or we'll have an open Q&A at the end where you can put up your hand and ask any questions either. So with that, Emma, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Orla, and thank you so much for having me today. It's really great to get out and speak to the guidance professionals face to face. So as Orla said, I am leading the Skills Policy Unit, and one of the things I look at is around sort of guidance policy, navigation policy, but also just skills policy in general. So what I'm going to do is just give you today a quick overview of the OECD review of the skills system. So how we did it, why we did it, what it tells us about navigability and coherence of the structure, and then where we are now and some of the next steps that we're looking on. So this won't take very long. It sounds like it's going to be a lot more complicated than it is, but it's not, I promise. So the review, as you know, was done in conjunction with the OECD there over almost a 2-year period, and the report was published in May 2023. And I'm popping up a link to the publication there. It's enormous. Please don't feel you have to read it all. If you want a nice synopsis, there's an executive summary which is about 20 pages. So it's not too bad. So we looked at a number of priority areas in conjunction with the OECD, and all of which sort of feed into this coherence and navigability issue. So the priority areas were around balance and skills. So how we obtain our skills, where we obtain them, how we use them in the workforce, and so on. Then the developing of relevant skills over the life course. So this is feeding into the sort of lifelong learning workforce development agenda. Then the issue around partnership to drive that skills agenda. So this is where we're talking about the sort of structures that we would work with, the things like the National Skills Council, things like the Regional Skills Fora, which Orla will be intimately familiar with, and also some other less formal groupings. And then the fourth area was around skills and talent as key drivers of innovation and productivity. And that's really a piece around embedding that messaging in enterprise. So skills are not just for individuals, they're also a good for enterprise because they help basically with your bottom line. So those were, I suppose, the sort of areas that we looked at. It was a huge piece of partnership work. We engaged approximately 270 stakeholders from all sorts of backgrounds, education and training providers and government agencies, obviously, but also employers, civil society, employer associations. Indeed, some of the people on this call may have engaged with some of the partnership activities that we hosted as part of the engagement with the OECD. We had 65 stakeholder meetings of different types. So we had 2 really big stakeholder workshops that we hit around 340 stakeholders at. We also then did a series of 6 regional workshops. They were aimed very much at getting the direct voice of enterprise. And that was a really interesting piece for us because it gave us that direct feed of information by getting out of our own sort of our own sort of ivory tower, I suppose, a little bit, and out into the community to talk about what was needed. And then we also did a series of public consultations by means of questionnaires and a range of focus groups, one-on-one meetings, bilaterals. It was an enormous amount of engagement. But that engagement really rooted the findings of the OECD in a really, I suppose, validated way. So, it wasn't just that we were talking to each other in an echo chamber, we were out there, we were talking to other people, and it really helped us, I think, to underpin that sort of partnership approach. So the review has 12 opportunities for Ireland under each of those 4 priority areas I mentioned, and those are underpinned again by 24 specific recommendations. So it's quite a detailed and granular piece of work. And I suppose just to give you the very broad outlines of what they found. So they found that Ireland actually has a burning platform for skills. Skills matter, they're vital. There's a rapidly changing world of work out there. The scale of pace of change is such that we now need to take a leap forward because we can't stand still. We've done really well so far, but standing still is not going to get us anywhere. And so we now need to think about how we build on our ambitiously on our strengths and put skills at the centre of our agenda going forward. So in some detail, just to go into those in some detail, positive things is that the share of young adults with a tertiary degree is significantly above the OECD average. So we're performing really, really well for our young people, really well for our young people. But many Irish adults are at risk of falling behind as they don't have the skills to survive. So what that means basically is that once you leave our formal education system, there's a danger of falling off a cliff. And this is really an issue for us because, it's no longer the case that when you go into work, you stay in that particular job. There's so much change, and also we have this aging demographic. So it's important that people continue to learn throughout the workforce and throughout their working lives. However, our participation in lifelong learning falls far behind the top EU performers. Now we're about average. In fact, I would say we're a little above average in terms of OECD or EU performance on lifelong learning rates, but we lag Sweden and Finland by up to 40%. So, those are the places we want to be. We don't want to be just good enough. We want to be best in class. At the same time, employers that we spoke to are expressing significant concern about labour and skills gaps across a range of different areas. So it's sector specific, but there are also skills gaps that they're talking about in terms of sort of digital skills, in terms of the people skills, the transversal skills of people coming out graduating, and then also about people who are significantly skilled in the job that they're doing at the moment, but don't have the skills for what's coming next within that job. So there's quite a bit of concern about that. So basically, this means that there's significant investment in skills necessary. Supports for management, so that they embed that message. And I suppose part of the messaging that is really important coming out of the OECD skills review is that there are certain cohorts of the labour market that engage very well with lifelong learning. People who are highly educated, people who work in large companies. There are still gaps there that we have to reach. So people working in SMEs, people who are working in areas that are in danger of, automation, people who are older workers. We know that the longer you are out of education, the less chance there is that you're going to re-engage. So there's a lot of work for us to be done in this space. So part of that is around letting people know what the offerings are, bringing those messages out to them. And the OECD makes specific recommendations around career guidance. So they need to map out training provisions that already exist in Ireland. We know, for example, that there's oodles of opportunities out there for people to engage with learning and upskilling and reskilling. They're not necessarily known to everybody. Again, the need for strong, coherent and consistent messaging around that provision. People need to know how to get to where they want, why it's important for them to get to where they want, and how they can access the information to let them do that. That piece around the importance, value, and benefit of engagement with lifelong learning, that's an important piece of this messaging. And then there's also a compelling need to support enterprises as well as individuals to navigate the information. So the OECD identified issues with our messaging around the offering and with how the career guidance system works to do that. So we have a way forward on this. Um, so as you know, at the moment we're in the midst of the European Year of Skills, and just coincidentally, I happen to be the Irish coordinator for the Year of Skills, so this is very much in my wheelhouse. Um, I would say that as a country, we are not we're not people who just see skills as an issue that's a year long. We've been doing a lot on this even before the OECD came to town. We've been doing a lot on it before the European Year of Skills was announced, and we'll continue to do a lot to embed the messaging around the importance of skills. As you know, the years roll out after May, we'll continue with this messaging, and really our messaging is around something that I think everybody on this call knows. Learning as we know it has changed. Skills have a shelf life. I think the World Economic Forum tells us that we have to be looking at our own skills every 2 years just to be able to keep up with the transformation in the world of work that's going on at the moment. So this means that we really want to have a transformed model of learning and talent development. So I suppose what we're trying to do is get away from this concept that you have, a 4-year degree, and that enables you to keep a career for 30 or 40 years and you never have to touch learning and development again. I mean, that just simply is not going to work. We now need to have a model whereby learning and earning is intertwined so that throughout your work life, learning is part of your actual working environment, it's part of your working day, it's part of your working week. So some of the focus areas that we're looking at within the department are around more short, flexible, blended skilling options. So things like the micro-credentials project, things like modular learning, also things like, say, the e-college platform, those kind of things. And all of this, I suppose, to help assist in workforce mobility, but mobility is even the wrong word. It's um, to allow people to take ownership of their learning journey in a flexible way, in a way that suits them. Then supporting, trusting, and partnering with employers as part of that workforce development agenda. And I'll touch on some of this in a later slide around how we go about that. This issue of easing navigability through the learning options. And again, I'll come back to this in a moment, but this is a really key piece for us. And I suppose something that the OECD has identified for us, it's not that there are no options available to people to learn. There are oodles of options. There's lots of different ways that you can learn. It's just very difficult to know what's right for you if you're not within the ecosystem. And even if you are within the ecosystem, sometimes it can be very difficult to understand what another part of that system is doing. So we need to ease that navigability. And we need to support individualized, continuous journeys of learning and development. So even though we know those priorities are there, we are trying to underpin the governance structure to allow us to align our governance structure fully with the advancements in Ireland's ambitious skills agenda, to support driving of the implementation of the OECD skills review, and to benefit from a renewal of our strategic vision for the future. So I suppose just to touch on that for a moment, and this is a question that Orla asked me just when we were coming on the call, the biggest piece of this platform is around reforming the National Skills Council. So it's very, very important for us on foot of the OECD agenda that we advance everything we're doing in partnership. So we're not, as I say, sitting behind a closed door, not talking to enterprise, thinking we know what's right for everybody and not really discussing it with them. So we're working at the moment to broaden out the membership of the National Skills Council to bring on more enterprise members, but also to bring on the social partners. And, we're hoping to have an announcement on that, hopefully by the end of the month. It could be into early April. But once we have that council in place, that they're going to really, we hope, drive forward this agenda and help us to prioritise what we need to do, to embed the work that we're doing already, and to build on the work that we're doing already. And I suppose just to put the spotlight on navigability and pathways, which is really what the people on this call really wanted to learn about. As you know, we have the strategic framework for lifelong guidance that was announced in December. This is a joint piece of work between ourselves in the department and the Department of Education. And the whole idea underpinning that is that there is a continuum of guidance. So guidance doesn't just stop in schools. There's a continuum on into the adult education piece. There's a continuum on to workforce development, and it's underpinned, I suppose, by this underlying message of the complexity of what's out there, the enormity of the challenge in trying to decide what the right pathway for you is, and the framework, we hope, is going to give people a better model for doing that, and give the various different players in the field a way of plugging into each other to know what's going on across government. One of the pieces that's important for our department is the information piece, and the information piece, I suppose, just to be frank with people on the call, the ambition is to build an information source that is available for everyone. However, we are constrained by resources, and so what we think we're going to do is try and pilot something in the first instance to give us an idea of what that will look like. I suppose what we're grappling with a little bit is the fact that there are lots of different information sources out there that you all would be familiar with. I'm talking about Careers Portal, I'm talking about the Solus courses, the Qualifax, lots and lots of different portals, and also some information that's very sectoral focused. So there's a load of information out there, and really how do we get at it in the best way is important to us. And I suppose what we're trying to do is decide what is the best way to do that. So we think what we'll do is try and take a particular learner profile and try and focus on that learner profile in the first instance, and also focus on a career information pathway as opposed to a course information pathway. So this is all in very early stages of discussion as to how we'll go about it. But I suppose just to say that is a big piece of work that we're focused on this year, in trying to get that pilot up and running and take learnings from it and build on it then. And then there are some other things that we're doing around this navigability piece, which are, I suppose, less about the information that's out there and more about, showing the pathways that are available. So things like the National Tertiary Office offerings, this joint degree program where you can start in FET and move on to higher ed. That's a really important piece of work for us, because it's, I suppose, showing people that there is a different way, not just the CAO way of getting into a professional career. And it also, I suppose, is a building block for our ambition to have a coherent tertiary system. So this is one part that will be built on. So that's an important piece of work. Another important piece of work that we're hoping to do this year is around that embedding of the messaging on lifelong learning, particularly within the SME community. As I say, we know that if you're working in a smaller company, it can be quite hard to engage in learning. So we're hoping to pilot an incentivization scheme in the second half of the year, specifically aimed at SMEs, specifically aimed at encouraging them to engage with the lifelong learning agenda. So there's a lot of those are only four of the many things that we're doing. And they look like they're very small pieces of work when they're written on a slide, but they're actually enormous. So there's lots happening in this space. And I suppose what I would say to you is, as you know, this is a cultural piece, and, changing people's, embedding people's messaging around continuous learning, about the importance for individuals, for society, for enterprise to engage, around the challenges that we're facing if we don't engage. It's a change management piece, and it's a change of culture piece. And it's slow. It's slow, but we are seeing successes in it, small pieces of success, and we'll continue to build on that. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm very happy to take questions as they arise.
Thanks very much for that, Emma. That was a really insightful and a really clear snapshot of what's going on at the moment, and some interesting issues there kind of coming up that would be relevant to this community. I'm just going to look, there's just a question in the chat, but if anyone would like to put their hand up and ask Emma a question, or give an opinion, or needs a clarification on anything, please put your hand up. Orla, I know you posted a question in the chat, so I'm just going to read on that. So this was about the single portal based on career paths. I was going to ask about that myself. This is exactly what LinkedIn Learning are doing. Is this something that the National Skills Council can learn from or partner with? So I suppose, as you said, Emma, there's a lot of work going on in this space already by lots of different people. And how is this going to build on what's already there and not just add another layer of complication to it?
Yeah, and absolutely. I think Orla, that you've actually answered the question in exactly the way that I would have answered it, which is yes, is lots of stuff. LinkedIn Learning is one example, but there are lots of other platforms, I suppose, out there, and lots of other pieces of work that have been done. And that's something actually that is, I would say, almost the biggest issue for us, is how to bring all of those pieces together and what it will look like, and how we will try and do that in a way that's not duplicative, repetitive, that's actually helping people, as opposed to just throwing another source of information at them. So yeah, that's a really good question, and I wish I had the answer, but I suppose we're just at the point of trying to explore that a bit more.
And I suppose just in terms, I'll speak with my AHECS hat on, that, as you kind of work through this at department level, that I suppose on the ground, a lot of our members around the screen here are doing a lot of work in this space. So we'd be very open to working with yourselves, or like you mentioned there, maybe a pilot program first, but thinking about what you're thinking of doing, we'd be happy to work with you. I know a lot of people around here would be interested in this. It's something that we've been, I know, in our own AHEC submission to the OECD consultation process, this was something that we had put in as something that's really needed. So we'd be happy to work with you on that. Paula, I'll come to you. You have your hand up there.
Thank you very much, Orla. Excuse me, and thank you very much, Emma. That was very interesting. My question is around AI. It's very topical at the moment. It's not going away anytime soon, and it definitely is changing the way we work and the way we live. What insight can you give us with regard to skills, and maybe the way AI might change what we need to offer to our students to give them the best learning experience? And where do you see AI fitting in the lifelong learning?
Okay, so I suppose there are a couple of things that I would say, Paula, and I will hold my hand up and say that I am not a digital expert. I don't have a background in digital, so I find this absolutely terrifying. I'll be honest with you. But what I do think is really, like there are, I suppose, two strands to the AI piece. So there's a piece around sort of AI specific skills for ICT professionals, and just to, I suppose, say to you on that, we are actually engaged at the moment on a piece of research with the ESRI, who are looking at the sort of skills demands, I suppose, for ICT professionals in those new technologies. So AI is one of them. There's also blockchain and a few other kind of emerging technologies. And that piece of work is probably going to be published within the next 2 months, I would say. It's been peer reviewed at the moment, and that could be an interesting piece just to engage with on that, I suppose, just as a sort of career pathway piece. The other thing that I would say about AI is, in my view, AI is going to be like the internet of the future, or the email of the future. It's something that we're all going to be using in our working lives all the time, irrespective of where we work. And I think that will have an impact, Paula, really on the way you guys do your work. It'll have an impact on the way we do our work. It'll have an impact on the way every single student who's coming through your hands does their work into the future. But more as a tool as opposed to, or as a working method, as opposed to a specific career, if you understand me. So a piece of work, a piece of your sort of skills, competence, no matter what your job is, I guess. And the third thing I'd say about that, the AI piece, is that we also need to think, and again, my thinking is not at all developed on this, so this is like literally top of the head stuff, but I think we really need to think about how we can best utilize AI as part of whatever portal we put in place as a sort of supportive mechanism for people. You know, and how we marry that to the very clear need for people to have a human guidance piece. So there are a lot of questions out there, and I suppose we really don't know where AI is going, but those are just, I suppose, some top of the head observations if they're helpful.
And I'm sorry to ask you one more question.
Sure.
With regard to the skills piece, excuse me, and AI, do you know, if we had a crystal ball and you could look into it, do you think that skills will change radically due to AI, and that we will need to implement very different support for students as they go forward in time?
I'm not sure whether I'm answering your question right, so please feel free to come back to me if I'm not right. But I think it, in terms of just general engagement with AI, it's a skill that will need to be developed within students in the same way as any other digital skill. So that's, I suppose, that piece. And then in terms of how it changes the landscape, I don't think we really have a really good line of sight into that, because I think in a lot of cases it's not going to be, it's a little bit like the automation question. So it's not necessarily that that jobs will disappear or whatever, but the way jobs are done will be different, I think. Now, I'll be honest with you, Paula, I'm not that au fait with what's coming out of the SRI piece, but that's my sense, and I think it would be an interesting one to watch just at an early stage of AI development, kind of, because I think this is a space that's going to evolve very quickly, and it's very hard to predict what we're going to need in sort of 2050, because things have changed so much even in the last year with AI, you know. And also, as you may know, the public service is not the most technologically adept. So, like, I am not the person to be asking about AI.
I think you're doing fairly well, Emma. Don't worry about it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for that, Paula. And it actually, we had a speaker here in Trinity last week about AI in education over from the US, a professor, and it was just very interesting, him talking about, you know, embedding AI into everything that we do, and for every student about embedding AI into assessment, and about how you assess a student's use of AI, and to make sure, because that's what they're going to be using in the workplace, as you said, like email to do their job. So how can you work with students while they're within your university or your higher education institution to actually become good at using AI and to maximize the use of it? So you free up your time from the more functional operational stuff to be able to do higher value work, because a lot of the routine stuff is being done through AI. So you have the time to do stuff that only a human can do, like conceptualization and critical thinking. So it's quite an interesting way of looking at it. So I thought that was quite interesting. Mary Rose, you put a question in, so I'm just going to read it out here. In terms of skills needed for a specific career area, will there be practical financial supports available for people to learn skills at any stage, even if attending a degree course? So I think this is around the incentivization of people to engage in lifelong learning, and kind of what's the government thinking around that, you know, because there may be financial barriers to maybe some people engaging. There might be a willingness to engage in lifelong learning, but they just don't have the financial wherewithal or the means to do that. So has that come up in your conversations?
It has, and I suppose, again, I'm not sure whether I'm actually answering the question correctly, so do please feel free to come back and ask for clarification. I suppose there are a couple of strands to this. So there's the financial issue, which obviously is an issue for some people, and I would say that there is an awful lot of subsidised or free training in Ireland. So, like, we are actually quite ahead of the game, you know, on that piece of work. So there's that. I would also say that the OECD research shows us that financial barriers are not necessarily the main barriers for people. So in Ireland, it seems that there's a big appetite for lifelong learning, but it's actually a time constraint as opposed to a financial constraint for people. So you know, I suppose, how can I put this? You know, I'm just going to put it as bluntly as I'm going to say it. Throwing money at the issue is not necessarily the answer. There are other things that people need in order to be able to engage with lifelong learning. And I would say as well, you know, to be fair, you know, there are some things that are within our control, and the SME incentivization scheme is part of a pathfinder to look at ways of how that might be helped by helping people to release people from their sort of their day job, so they're not going to have to learn at night or at weekends or whatever. So there's that piece. But there are also things that are outside the control of our department. So there are things like childcare, there are things like transport, there are things like, you know, lots of different factors that can be issues for people. And I suppose, you know, there's, look, to be honest with you, if it was easy, it'd be solved by now. So it's just a thing that you just have to keep chipping away, trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and hoping that you know what you can do to support people will work eventually, you know.
Yeah.
If I can just come in there briefly, just the purpose of asking is the students, let's say, noticing I could use this digital skill, but I can't give up my part-time job to learn that skill. I think it's that sort of, it isn't, you know, it's at the young stage when they mightn't have other responsibilities, but they can't afford to leave that because of the cost of living and paying for transport, etc., etc. They'd love to add X skill and do a course in it during the summer, but then they're not earning anything. I think it's not just the cost, it's of the, you know, the training I know is subsidized, and yes, there is a lot of provision and springboard and loads of courses people can do, but I think in terms of trying to upskill people when they're in the zone of learning, when at the college years is a very good time after, you know, they're already learning. So, you know, you meet them and they think, I'm interested in this career area. Oh, but I don't have any skills in, oh, what about doing a course? Oh, I can't do that because I'd have to give up my job. So I think it isn't big. It isn't, I think for some, I think, you know, there'll be different demands at different stages of the lifespan, you know, and different, but I think the financial is huge now. The cost factor, that the time, both the time and the money, I think are potential barriers where you'd have people enthusiastic to take on something and to learn a new system, a new technology. If you're saying every 2 years is the time span, that's quite a lot of learning throughout life, and very expensive if it's not being paid for.
I would say, like Mary Rose, there are probably a couple of strands to that, you know. There's the piece that I mentioned, and I suppose there's also the piece about how courses are delivered. So, you know, obviously, if you have to travel to wherever you're going to class, that's an issue. Whereas, you know, if you can access something through a platform like eCollege, we'd say, for argument's sake, that you can dip in and out of stuff, you know, that you can do it, like that's an issue as well. And so I suppose, like, none of these answers are easy. There's a huge reform piece ongoing continuously, and you know, some of that reform is easier to bring people with than others. And you know, it's as I say, just being conscious, I suppose, that there is the cost barrier, but it's not necessarily the cost of the course that is the financial barrier as such, you know. So just to be aware of that, I guess.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Rose. Thanks for that question. And I suppose building on that, you mentioned there about piloting some stuff and trying some stuff, and I suppose the whole micro-credentials program that a lot of our institutions are involved in has really helped a lot of us to tease out, well, what delivery mode works, when actually works to do this, you know, what types of learning people want, how much time can they give, you know, and we've been trying lots of different things out right across the country, and we'll be coming to the stage where we'll be amalgamating all our learnings and really using that to influence university strategies into the future in terms of these more flexible offerings, particularly because there's just a much broader diversity of learners coming into our education system now that we're having to work with. I don't see any other hands up or any other questions in chat. If anybody else has, please do. But I just have one question. Well, I have two actually, but I'll ask the first one because I think one of the biggest challenges that we all face, and you alluded to it earlier on, was about that skills knowledge transfer. How do we know on the ground in our institutions what skills are coming down the line, and that engagement with enterprise? Now, I know you mentioned through the National Skills Council trying to get more enterprise partners in there. And I know across all the HCI programs, we've been very involved in enterprise engagement as well. But again, it's not an easy thing to do. And I suppose for us on the ground talking to students where we're kind of doing career planning with them and looking to the future and skills for the future, to have that knowledge and that insight, that labour market information piece is very challenging to get as well, I think, Emma, because it's coming from all places, and a lot of it depends. If you know somebody in the IDA, they'll tell you what they're doing. If you know you'll tell us what they're doing. Solus will tell us what they're doing. Has there been any talk to that labour market information piece and about doing something cohesive about that we can really have very concrete information we can bring into our institutions and to our students?
So again, this is actually becoming a mantra of mine on this call. If it was easy, it would have been done. So you're not wrong. There are lots of players in the LMI piece as well. There are lots of people who are doing really good research, and there are lots of people who don't necessarily sit under the hat of this department who are doing really good research. And that the labour market information piece has actually been identified in the OECD review as a piece that needs work. So data, basically. So not just, I suppose, not just labour market information, but also data around outcomes and all that kind of stuff. It is part of that pie. But the LMI piece is particularly, I suppose, close to our hearts here in this unit. We're trying to do something about cohering it. We're trying very hard, but like I would say, if the LMI piece of data is a mountain range, we are not even in the foothills of the mountain range. Like we're standing looking at the mountain to try and find a way of coming up with what we can do. Like there's lots of ideas out there around how we might do things, what we might look at, how we might build something, blah blah blah. All of it takes money. And all of it takes an awful lot of bringing people along a journey with us. So again, it's something that we are looking at. But I wouldn't make promises about having any sort of quick solution that you're going to find in a couple of weeks' time, that there's something that you can just push a button and everything will come out. A lot of it is around that engagement piece. A lot of it is around having your contacts and doing that. And I know that's really painful and can be really painful, but I don't see a quick solution to it, albeit that we are trying to do stuff. Now there are lots of platforms out there that are doing parts of this piece. So, you know, perhaps it's around engaging with those platforms and so on. But again, it's patchy, I suppose, is what I would say.
And I suppose, I mean, it's in terms of, I mean, obviously the resources are short across career services. So we have to try to make the best use of our time. And this, as you said, it's just very time consuming to do. And I suppose at an association level here at AHECS, we are looking to see how we can bring our community together more to have conversations around this and shares our learnings. But just from our viewpoint, any kind of developments in that area would be very, very welcome, because it is a very time consuming and ongoing piece of work. I'd say every single person on this call spends at least some part of their day trying to get this type of labour market information and data, and you know, it's not easy to find. So I think, you know, that would be very welcome from us. maybe just, you know, is there any feedback from employers on their support for a learning and earning model whereby employers build in skills learning into a daily workload? Has that come up in any of your conversations, Emma?
It's funny that we had a conversation recently, and this is just anecdotally, I suppose, as opposed to giving you any sort of firm view on it. We had a meeting recently with the minister and the chairpersons of the regional skills council networks, and there was a very interesting point made about potential to leverage the concept of a 4-day working week to enable people to have a learning and earning piece. So that maybe you have a 4-day working week, and maybe one of the fifth days, one of your free fifth days, you're obliged to do some learning. You know, so, but it was a concept. You know, there's nothing more to it than that, just a concept. The other piece that I would say on this is the SME incentivization scheme, I think, will give us a little bit of learnings out of that, as to what might be useful. I suppose where the issue is really is in the SME and micro community. I mean, if you're in a huge big company and you have an L&D department and you have lots of staff, you know, or you're in the public service, if I take a day off to go training, it doesn't really matter, because it doesn't mean that the production line is going to fall down. You know, if you're in an SME where you have maybe 5 people in a place, you know, if one of those 5 people being away for a day is a huge issue. So there's a bit of work to be done in our thinking around that, you know, and how we can make that earning and learning model work for everybody, not just for the learner, but also for the employers. There's a bit of work to be done there, I think.
Thanks for that, Emma. I think that's a really interesting, you know, and I know that the 4-day working week has been, you know, spoken about quite a lot and quite extensively now, and there's a lot of companies signing up to it worldwide, and here in Ireland. So it'll be interesting to see what shape that takes. And I know even among some of our own teams, you might, in theory, have a, you know, this is some of your training space, but, you know, trying to keep that protected can be very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
So we fully appreciate the challenges that are there. We're just coming up to about 10 to 2, and I don't see any further questions or anything there. So I think with that, we'll maybe bring our discussion today to a close. I want to thank, on behalf of everyone, to thank Emma. Thank you for your time and for that insightful discussion. We fully appreciate a lot of this is a work in progress. And I suppose I just want to express the willingness of the AHECS community and the career services across HE to engage with yourselves and with the minister in supporting work in this space, because really, you know, we're at the coalface working with students and shaping, you know, how we'll be working with them and shaping the workforce of the future. So very, very keen to be involved in any discussions or any pilots that you're running and to input to those. So thanks very much, Emma. Great to have you at our Lunch and Learn. And to our AHECS members, thanks for making time over your lunchtime to come along. Really appreciate it. We'll have another Lunch and Learn in the next couple of weeks, and Caroline will send a reminder around about that. But great to see you all, and have a nice day. Take care, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.